So I want to make the case for shared assets, protocols, and digital tools to address India's rural water security problem at scale. The problem in India that we have is, on one hand, we have the problem of too much irrigation resulting in groundwater depletion, what we might call the water overexploitation problem. On the other hand, you have a water underexploitation or a water poverty problem, where a large fraction of farmers have no access to irrigation at all, and as a result are extremely poor. So we also have the mixed problem of both of these problems coexisting in a single location, where even as half the farmers lack access to irrigation and are rain fed, groundwater has already become severely exploited in those regions. And we see a lot of this particular case in peninsular India. So the question then becomes that why is it that despite large amounts of sector investment, we aren't able to move the needle on rural water security? And overall aggregate indicators seem to be going in the wrong direction. So I would say there are three problems. Firstly, we don't know where different types of interventions are effective. This is what I call the what works where question, and it comes up with every single donor and large NGO which has to work across multiple landscapes. And evaluating where a particular type of intervention works is hard because India is so physiographically and socioeconomically diverse that what the nature of the rural water security problem itself varies. The second problem is that it's difficult to answer the question of are we doing the right thing, because different interventions work on different parts of the value chain. And it's what I would call the what works how question. And it makes it difficult to basically say, should I invest in one water security intervention or the other, because they have very, very different theories of change. So for instance, most rural water security interventions are aimed at increasing farmer income. And they do so either by expanding irrigation or increasing water availability per hectare by through rainwater harvesting or other means of mobilizing water, or they invest in increasing yields and efficiency, the so-called more crop per drop, or they involve getting improved higher prices and market linkages through FPOs and so on, or they may involve increasing farmer incomes through off-farm activities like value-added activities or rural tourism and so on. And comparing these interventions and being able to figure out where should you invest in order to increase that left-hand side of the equation then becomes hard, because each of these is working on a completely different scale. Some are plot scale, some are farm scale, some are village scale, and some are watershed scale. The third piece of it is being able to ask whether the interventions done were actually effective or not. The did it actually work question. And here we want to know whether a particular intervention has worked, and it's difficult because often there are confounding variables. So for instance, water body desilting, the theory of change is that it enhances recharge and boosts groundwater levels. However, groundwater levels could also go up because farmers have changed their abstraction, or it's simply because it rained more in a particular year. Additionally, these situations are not static. Groundwater levels may increase in one year, but once farmers have realized that water levels are consistently higher because of whatever watershed intervention was undertaken, they might start switching to more intensive crops. And in fact, the very objective of watershed interventions is to make farmers get more access to water. And so it shouldn't be surprising that abstractions are going up, because in fact that was the intention and the design of the watershed intervention. So the question, of course, becomes, are we defining the problem correctly? Are we implementing the right solution for that problem? And then are we making a positive difference when unintended consequences are considered? And what is needed then is a meta investment in the sector that can address each of these three questions. And so this is what the solution that we are proposing hopes to do. It hopes to better diagnose problems. It hopes to result in better solution design. And finally, it hopes to result in better tracking of rural water security interventions. Now, the first thing we did is we conducted 20 in-depth interviews with key informants in the sector, and we identified gaps to understand why this was not already happening. And the survey suggested the need for shared reference frames, shared assets, protocols, and tools in the water sector. So we need a common reference frame, so we all call the same problem the same thing. We're using the same definitions. We're typifying the problems in the same way. We need to be able to prevent duplication of effort. There's a lot of duplication of effort where multiple NGOs intervening at different times are doing the same thing over and over again. And finally, we need to address the bottleneck, which is technical expertise. So the first solution that we hope to address is this problem of the shared reference graph. And what we hope to do is to create problem typologies to better typify rural water security problems. So for instance, a very obvious way of typifying rural water security is to separate watersheds that are groundwater overexploited from watersheds that are groundwater poor. And the former would then involve demand side interventions of reducing or reallocating water resources, and the latter might involve increasing or expanding access to irrigation. And so completely different approaches of demand versus supply side based on the initial typology. And then there may be additional levels of classification that might result in a much richer typology set. The second solution is to create shared assets and protocols to address the duplication problem. And here is what we are primarily hoping to do is to develop a set of common data layers and a set of tools that would allow communities to be able to use common ways of collecting data, store them in common repositories, and then be able to share these repositories with each other through available cloud-based APIs or through Google Earth Engine. And the third bottleneck that we hope to address is capacity building programs to address the expertise bottleneck problem. And here we hope to basically show farmers, show communities and NGOs on the ground how to actually use all of the data that they are collected, and all the data that exists in these common repositories together in order to make decisions and specifically in order to do better rural water security plans. And so overall, what we hope is that these sets of common, what I call the knowledge commons, investment in the knowledge commons, would help communities as well as grassroots NGOs as well as Gram Panchayats do better all the way from asking the right questions to collecting the right sorts of data to being able to harvest and use existing data sources and actually then apply the correct set of tools to arrive at solutioning. So our 5-year execution roadmap involves creation of design tools, then development of training materials, and then finally in year 5, we hope to roll out these training materials nationally in working in partnership with government agencies. Thank you.